Okay, so today you're going to go through the scientific method, but with a different phenomenon. You're going to do it on your own. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's go through the slides together so that we know what you're kind of expected to do. Okay, on the first slide, it starts off by having you describe the phenomenon. Okay, so you just write down what that phenomenon appears to be, what's happening. Okay, then you need to write a question, and because this is a scientific method, that question needs to be both specific and related to the phenomenon. Okay, so get those, or write that question. Then you come up with a hypothesis. We remember from yesterday, a hypothesis is an educated answer to that question. Then you need to develop an experiment. Now, you're not going to do the experiment. Okay? Instead, you're just going to imagine something that you could do to test your hypothesis. Okay? Then in the next one, so in slide 2, this is where things get maybe can be considered confusing. In slide 2, for analysis of your data, I want you to analyze both a positive outcome and a negative outcome from your experiment. You need to consider your experiment and say, okay, what are two things that could occur? A positive outcome is something that supports your hypothesis, saying that your hypothesis could be right. A negative outcome is something that says your hypothesis is wrong. Does that make sense? Okay, nice catch. Anyways, so you'll go through, you'll imagine two different outcomes from your experiment, and then on the last slide, you explain what those two outcomes mean. Okay, you'll probably say things like that one means our hypothesis was right, one means it was wrong. Let's go through a hypothetical situation and see how we feel. Okay, so how many of you guys have ever mixed baking soda and vinegar? Okay, let's see. Gunnar, what happens when you mix baking soda and vinegar? Okay, makes chemical reaction, and then it explodes, like with fire and a big loud noise, that kind of explosion? Not quite, right? It makes like a bunch of bubbles, and it'll foam out and things like that, right? Okay. Have any of you guys ever seen elephant toothpaste? Okay. Quinn, can you explain to us what elephant toothpaste looks like for anyone who's not seen it? Okay, so they mix some chemicals in a beaker, okay, and then a lot of foam, okay? Like if baking soda and vinegar compared to elephant toothpaste, it's like baking soda and vinegar is like a toddler. Elephant toothpaste is like a rock in like the amount of foam created. Does that make sense? So elephant toothpaste creates a lot of foam, really dramatic, all of that. Well, one of the things that's used in elephant toothpaste is hydrogen peroxide. And you probably have hydrogen peroxide at home. It's normally in little square brown bottles. Your mom put it on your boo-boos when you got hurt and it foamed and stinged. Okay, and then she'd kiss it better, right? Okay. So let's say I want to do an experiment, and my question is, for this experiment, my question is, what would happen if I mixed baking soda from vinegar and baking soda with hydrogen peroxide from elephant toothpaste? Okay, I want to know what will happen if I put those two together. Okay, so let's develop a hypothesis. What do you guys think would happen if I put those together? Gwen? Okay, so you're going to say, do we want to say then that there won't be any bubbles, no foam? Or do we want to say, yeah, there's foam, there's bubbles? What do you guys think? Okay, you're just going to go with that? So we're going to say no bubbles. All right. Okay, so then we're going to do an experiment. We need to test our hypothesis. How could we test our hypothesis? By doing it. You mix baking soda and hydrogen peroxide to see what happens, right? Okay, so we mix those. What would a positive outcome look like? One that supports the hypothesis.
There's no bubbles or foam.
Right, no bubbles. No bubbles would be a positive outcome because it supports our hypothesis of no bubbles. What would a negative outcome be? Does make bubbles, okay? That does not support our hypothesis. Does that make sense? And then for our conclusions, our positive conclusion would be like, when we mixed baking soda and vinegar, we found no bubbles produced, right? Our negative outcome conclusion, when we mixed baking soda and vinegar, we did see bubbles produced. Does that make sense? That's essentially what you're doing today, but with a different phenomenon. Is everybody with me? Everybody got the slides open? Okay. Here's the phenomenon today. So right here, I have what's called a hand boiler. Anyone ever seen one of these before? Okay. Now a hand boiler has two bulbs on it at the bottom and on the top. Okay. And it has a red fluid here inside. And the point of this is I want to get the red fluid from this bulb into this bulb. Yeah, Gunner's got it. So logic tells us the easiest way to do that would be to turn it upside down. But there's a straw in it, you're right, that blocks that opening. So somehow I have to force that up through the straw. Well, that sounds like quite the task, but really has a very easy solution. I simply hold, and it shoots up the straw. Not only that, but it appears to be boiling. I'm going to move this closer to the camera than they can see at home. Okay, it appears to boil. Now, if I let go, okay, it begins to flow back down. It's kind of stopped boiling. In fact, I can speed that up if I hold on to the top. It all drops back down. And then I could do it again, right? I just hold on to the bottom. And it goes back up to the top. Maybe that's the question you want to ask, right? Okay? So your purpose today in class is to start by describing the phenomenon, okay, that you just saw, ask a question about it, develop a hypothesis for it, consider an experiment that could be done. This experiment is hypothetical, so it does not need to be realistic, okay? So you consider an experiment that could be done, then consider two potential outcomes for that experiment, one that supports your hypothesis, one that does not, and then explain those results, okay? What would a positive result mean? What would a negative result mean? And then you end by explaining how scientists communicate results, okay? Any questions? Okay. It's called a hand boiler. Okay, go for it.